Inescapably foreign.
Welcome to Without Borders. I'm your host, Nolan Janssens. If this is your first time tuning into the show, remember you can go to withoutborders.fyi to access the transcript, some language notes, and a bunch of interesting articles about nomad experiences, immigrant stories, and there's just a bunch there for anyone else that feels inescapably foreign. Today, I'm here with Tola Alade, and he's an experienced creative director, brand designer, and CEO of Marmalade Venture. We're going to get into that a bit more. But first of all, Tola, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing very well. It's great to finally be on a call now.
Yeah. I've been excited. I've been looking forward to this for the past, I guess, month and a half. I contacted you.
Yes.
So I found out about Marmalade Collective because I was looking at other websites that's used ghost.org. And are you the one who started the website as well, or was that someone on your team?
No, that's myself. That was after lots of research, weighing up pros and cons, and finally decided on Ghost.
Yeah. I'm super happy with Ghost because for the listeners who don't know, it's nonprofit. They're also carbon neutral. So it's an organization online that I feel good about being a part of.
Yes. And clearly it's connecting people as well. So
yeah. So Tola, where are you right now?
So I'm based in London, England. And I've lived here for since 2004, which is 18 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. And are you in Shoreditch? Because I saw you were doing some projects in Shoreditch, correct? Or
No. So I used to have an office in Shoreditch, and Shoreditch has become somewhere I just spend quite a lot of time, both professionally as well as just socially partying. Yeah.
Okay. And did you grow up in London?
I would say, so I came to the UK when I was 16 in 2004. So I would say my formative years in terms of my formative years as a young adult or, a teenager, were sort of happened over here. Yeah.
Okay. And where are you originally from?
I'm from Nigeria.
From Nigeria. Okay.
Lagos, Nigeria. Yeah.
Nice. And do you go back there often or?
So I came in 2004, as I mentioned before, and it took me a long time to go back, purely off the back of, I wanted to go with the right people because, I had some concerns about, not knowing enough people back there and not being able to access certain places or certain things. And what happened is I managed to get a group of friends, about 4 of us in total, and we went back in 2018, and that was just it was such a life-changing experience.
In what way?
In a genuine way. Yeah. Sorry?
In what ways was it life-changing?
I mean, to say one, a lot of my, I'm from Nigeria, but because I grew up there mostly as a child, my understanding or my recollection of how Nigeria was, or how Lagos was specifically, was seen through the eyes of a kid. But going back as a sort of adult, I just got to see things differently. And some of my assumptions about just the state in which I thought I left Nigeria are completely blown away. Everything has changed. There's nothing you really want to access, but there's nothing you can access in the West that you can't access in Lagos, Nigeria. It's so cosmopolitan, and also it was where I had the initial idea for Marmalade when I went in 20.
I was just gonna say, because if you had certain assumptions and they were broken from that trip, that's also what you're achieving with Marmalade, right? Is changing kind of like these brand images.
Yeah.
But so before we get into that, or we can tie it into Marmalade, what were some of these specific assumptions that were broken from this visit?
So, first one was it's unsafe. Going to Africa, going to anywhere in Africa, isn't safe. You're gonna need, a constant bodyguard or or some sort of police or someone following you around just in case something happens. That was nonsense, because first of all, I've never felt safer anywhere else than I felt, when I was in Lagos. Um, Another assumption is just basic things like, the water wasn't going to be good enough, or the internet wasn't going to be, as quick as I want it to be. And those things were absolutely like the complete opposite. And finally, it was just the types of people I met whilst I was out there. I've worked in the creative space for the last 12 years, and I've worked with some really amazing people over here in the UK as well as abroad in the US, and just being able to meet people of very similar caliber, as well as in some cases probably even a lot better, was just mind blowing for me, and it just got me excited about what was happening, especially in the creative entrepreneurial space.
Now, do you think most of these assumptions exist because how it's still portrayed in some mainstream media? Or do you think it's more historical? Like, do you think there just have been a lot of sudden changes in the past 5 years or the past 10 years?
I think it's a mixture of both, and I'll say three things. I think one, of course, there's still very much, I would say a mixture of incomplete or negative sort of perception of Africa and who Africans are in general, in Western mainstream media. Some of that is just due to lack of ignorance, and some of that, I would say, in some cases, I don't know how much of that is is intentional, but I like to focus more on the things we can actually control. Then the second thing is, I think as Africans, or as Africa as a continent, we have lots of rich stories, but our ability to tell these stories, in a way that can resonate not just with ourselves but with the wider world, I think there's a huge area that needs to be explored. And then the final thing I think I've observed as well is, there are distribution channels that never used to exist 20 years ago that exist now. So it's making it a lot easier for information to flow and for people to access, information that they would have maybe relied on certain traditional media in order to access. But now, thanks to social media, thanks to influencers, thanks to people like yourself, being able to establish platforms and actually just go direct to the people that you want to reach. So I think these three factors have kind of contributed to where we are, and not where we've been, where we are, and hopefully where we're gonna go is very exciting.
Yeah, so from what I know from the Marmalade Collective, those three factors that you just went over, I think the Marmalade Collective is doing an excellent job, an outstanding job using these three factors in the work. Now, for the listeners who aren't familiar, can you just tell us a little bit more about the Marmalade Collective?
For sure. You know, when I had the idea for Marmalade, there's something about just you. I listened to a guy called Jordan Peterson. I listened to all of his lectures, and he's a clinical psychologist, and it's just amazing
that you brought him up, because I have some notes here for the interview that we're gonna get it. Well, hopefully.
Oh wow! Okay. And there's this phrase he says all the time, that sometimes we think we have ideas, but sometimes ideas have us. And I strongly believe Marmalade as a concept, as an idea, that's had me for a long time. Because I'm very fascinated and very interested in cultural diversity. I'm very interested in identity, and I'm also very interested in self-expression, because I believe we are individuals, and we should be allowed to express who we are in whatever way that manifests. So that's a long way to say. Initially, I felt something, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how it was meant to be brought to life. And then a short while later, the sort of foundation for Marmalade came off the back of this narrative, which is one, a very strong belief on what do I believe in terms of what do I believe of the world. And it came from this line: we believe Africa's stories and its culture are its most valuable assets. Some people would say no, it's natural resources. Some people will say it's, a whole bunch of different things. But in my opinion, these stories and African culture, is what we've been able to successfully export to the rest of the world. And also, is also one aspect of of Africa or Africans that benefits everyone from the top to the bottom. Everyone can access music, everyone can access films, everyone can access different things. So Marmalade initially started out from this really strong belief, and then I then moved into a next phase where what's opposing this belief in the actual wider world. And I realized it's just this incomplete perception of African culture in the mainstream. And it's not because there aren't people trying, or there aren't enough there aren't enough websites, or blogs trying, or different sort of mediums trying, but it's because a lot of the content that's been created, first of all, aren't as premium as I feel they need to be, and then secondly, they aren't brought to life in a way that really resonates with people that are non-black or non-African. So long and short is, Marmalade is a digital media company, and we are bringing Africa's culture and stories to life in a way that resonates not just with Africans, but with a global mainstream audience. And we call that sort of intersection of African audiences and mainstream audiences, we're calling that the new mainstream. So we're on a mission to basically build out this new mainstream, and really spread the influence or the understanding of African culture to that global mainstream.
Excellent. Now, I want to make sure we return to the economic side, and that's going to tie into Jordan Peterson. But what I found very interesting, what you just said, is how do we bring some of these African stories? And of course, stories and brands can be synonymous in some cases, especially with the type of work that you do. So what are some things that you do to reach the wide audience, right? Like people like me. What are some ways that you're doing so to make sure that these stories connect to a broader audience and don't just stay within Africa?
For sure. First of all, it's the ability to understand data. So a lot of what we do is very data driven. But initially, we were trying to do things the sort of the expected way, which is you have an idea and then you just go on social media and start creating original video content or original podcasts, distributing. But we very quickly realized there's already really amazing content out there, and we just don't want to add to we don't want to end up duplicating what's already exists. But there's a lack of curation. There's a lack of finding the best content. You as a subscriber, or you as someone that's interested in African culture, you wouldn't know where to look. So we then decided, rather than creating original content, we want to start by curating content. So at the moment, we have a newsletter that we publish every week, and in that newsletter, we basically create like a summary of 5 or 6 of the best stories in that week, or in the previous week, around African stories, about news of Africans, or sort of African culture,
And this includes entrepreneurs, musicians. I've seen that you do a lot with fashion and style as well, right?
Yeah. So we focus on music, we focus on fashion, we focus on food, and we also focus on travel as well. And we focus on these things because they are very experiential, and also they are a very quick way into, trying out food from a different culture doesn't require you to, first of all, speak the language or understand the language. You just have to be, interested. Same with music as well. They are lately I've been listening to a lot of Dutch rap. I don't understand a single word of what's been spoken, but
I've translator. I'll translate it for you. I speak Dutch. So.
Oh yes, yes. So I've been listening, and I came across this through someone on Instagram who's been listening a lot lately as well. And so for me, it's focusing on these things that are easier to that creates kind of like an inroad, into African culture, and leave out the very complicated subjects such as religion, such as politics, such as conversations around sex and gender, and those conversations. Yes, they are very useful, but at Marmalade we want to focus on the positive end of Marmalade and basically avoid things that's that sort of that keep people apart or that divide people. We actually want to bring people together, irrespective of wherever you're from. So unity is something that's very important to me, especially in a world that's very divisive. No.
Divided, yeah. Well, that's interesting because sometimes that's a very difficult thing to achieve, right? Because some people might end up being political without knowing it with their branding because they want to unify, right? Like if you look at a lot of the movies nowadays, they always make sure that there's a more diverse cast, right? They make sure that there's this many gay people, this many transgender people, this many people for Asian people, right? Now, by doing that, even if you just do it for, let's say, a commercial, right, and you're not making a political statement, you kind of are making a certain socio-political statement, right? And from a lot of content that I've seen on Marmalade, I don't think you do make these political statements, just as you said, right? You just focus on this enjoyment of bringing people together. And I think that's excellent. But one question I do have, like, for me, I've only been to Morocco. I haven't been to many countries in Africa, and I really want to go. And I'm well read enough, and I know enough people that I do have a very positive image about Africa as well. But one thing that always throws me a little bit is looking at the stats around politicians and the amount of anti-gay rhetoric that there is, right? Anti-LGBT kind of rhetoric. Is there anything that Marmalade is trying to do to show that, well, I don't know what the truth is. Is it as bad as they say? Like when I look at the statistics, right? Like, and of course with statistics you have to be careful, but you look at the amount of people in Nigeria that believe that being gay should be a crime, right? And it's quite high. I have to double check, but I think it was over 50%. And you see that this is written in the laws. Do you think that branding can change this perception? If branding should change this perception, is it true? Is it not true? Yeah,
sure. First of all, that is a very, very complex topic. Of course, the question is quite simple, but what is attached to that, it goes way back, and it goes into different strands of things we could explore. And of course, if we're at 3 hours to chat, I'll go deeper into what my own sort of personal views are about those subjects. But as I said in the beginning, where I'm deeply fascinated by self-expression, and just this belief that we are individuals and we are allowed to be who we are. And I think that's something, we definitely, push in terms of how we are, how we're portraying ourselves. We are definitely I would say it's definitely an area that we don't. It's a very, very, very huge sort of landmine in terms of just different views and the different opinions. So I would say those sorts of topics, we definitely don't focus on those. Not because we are I guess concerned about doing so. It's just very, very complex to get into, basically. But I'm aware of those stats. Again, as you said, I don't know the basis of what those stats are, but ultimately, everyone is allowed to be who they want to be, and express themselves how they want to express themselves as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, then, to bring it back to the Jordan Peterson and with the economy. So when I was preparing for this, I was reading a little bit about why certain countries in Africa might be doing better than others economically, and just looking at the history, why, of course, in many African countries there is quite a bit of a lower GDP, right, than in some other, or than in some Western countries. And of course, there's always the argument that, like, I think of the economist Nathan Nunn, right? He says that one of the key factors underlying Africa's uneven economic development is from the unexpected lingering after effects of the slave trade, right? And I was watching this video with Jordan Peterson and Magatte Wade. Do you know who Magatte Wade is?
No.
Okay, so she's an African woman. I forget which country she's from, but she's an entrepreneur, and she has this conversation with Jordan Peterson, and she thinks that there's way too much focus on this idea that the slave trade is the reason that Africa still doesn't have, or some African countries don't have, this economic development. And she says, no, that's bullshit. It's corrupt politicians, and there needs to be better economic regulation. And she believes that it's what's going to help Africa is a real focus on free trade, right? And she brings up some of the examples of countries that are doing well, and it has nothing to do with history of colonization or anything like that. It really has to do with what they're doing now, who they're voting for now, what kind of businesses are coming into play. But on the other side, when I read like Nunn's arguments about how much slavery and how much the colonization has affected Africa to this day, I think there are definitely both sides. But I was just wondering what your opinion is about this, because of course you're an entrepreneur and obviously very interested in building
for sure
the economy. So
for sure. Again, thank you for a great question. So I'll start with, again, what are my personal beliefs on the world? First of all, I believe hugely in individual responsibility, which is you have to figure out what you can do to solve whatever sort of issues that you see in the world. If there are things that call out that seek your attention constantly, then there's something in there. There's something in there to be explored. So that's always my guiding principle in terms of everything I go into. Colonization, I think in general, of course, is quite an emotive topic. That many people have, given their sort of views on what they think happened, what they know happened, how they think that sort of impacted where we are today. And you can't discount the sort of impact of what the 400 years of slavery, what that basically, what that sold, or what that sort of how that has potentially, affected where Africa is as a continent. But again, I believe that's something that did happen, and also it's co- colonization, happened to not just Africans, everyone at different stages of sort of been through.
That's exactly what she says in the interview as well. She says, "Newsflash, it's part of human history, right? Europeans were enslaving other Europeans, and
we just happen to be the most recent ones. You can go as far back as the Mongols, and just every continent or every sort of superpower in the world, or country or continent, have sort of been through different phases of this. I think where we are right now, we need to recognize the abilities and the access that we do have, and literally just start solving our own problems. I've chosen to focus more on the media side of things, which is to focus on how do you change perception, and how do you shape perception in a more positive way. And we are basically starting here, and who knows what this will be in 5 years, or who knows what this will be in 10, 20 years. So for me, what happened. That's the way I personally look at things. My mom is a very entrepreneur Nigerian woman. A lot of my sort of passion for building businesses actually comes from her, and she's never, for once, we've never had a conversation about slavery. We've never, because first of all, yes, she's aware of it, but I don't think she lived her life under the shadow of slavery, and always having to make connections about everything that happens to you presently back to those things. So for me, I've always felt the emotional attachment to slavery has always been something really pushed and promoted, probably more by African Americans, because they there's this and this is my own way of quoting this. There's this strong lack of a rooted identity, I would say, so to speak, in terms of who are you, and if your sense of identity is not grounded properly, then it leads to some of the conversations that we have over social media. So for me personally, I understand the past, I understand the present, and I'm more excited about the future, and how the things we have access to, and the tools we have access to, and the understanding we have of the wider world, where this is going to lead us to, because that's what you should be more concerned about, as opposed to what has been, because what has been, you can't change that, but where you are going to be is what we need to invest time and resources into shaping right now.
Definitely. Like, of course, to understand where you're going, you do have to understand where you have been. But I think sometimes this conversation just focuses too much on where we have been, and it just creates a greater divide sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than focusing on the future, rather than focusing on our similarities, rather than focusing like what you're doing with your project, the ways that we can work together and the ways that we can help each other, rather than focusing on all the horrible things we did in the history, which of course is crucial to know, but it shouldn't be the center of the conversation in my view.
And just to mention as well, Nolan, and that's what really drew me to, really wanting to, have this conversation with you as well, which is just even the name of your platform, Without Borders. I believe that's where we are going in the world. The world is becoming more borderless, and people are going to converge over mutual interests, and more over experiences, as opposed to this is where I'm from, or skin color, or race. I think people are going to move and merge in ways that probably we haven't seen over the last maybe 100 years, and that's what's happening right now. So this this divisive conversations that happen in the general world, again, I understand them. But you can choose what you do moving forward. And we want a world where, people are truly unified. And, there's a phrase that I use all the time, which is unity, not uniformity. We don't want to be, boxed into different camps, which is, black people and, Dutch people. And it's like, no, we're just humans. Of course, we're humans with, experiences and strong ties to our heritage and strong ties to our culture. And the beauty is seeing those cultures, basically, spread beyond the actual beyond the geographical borders of these places. So that's what really gets me excited about what you're doing and these stories that you're telling as well.
Thank you, and it is my goal with Without Borders, right? And what did you say? Sorry, instead of focusing on uniformity, we should be focusing on unity.
So unity, not uniformity. Yeah.
Uniformity, and instead of putting people in boxes. And
yeah,
that kind of makes me think, like when I went to university, I studied English and psychology, so I had a lot of classes in the arts, and they started talking a lot about critical theory, right, and checking your privilege and everything like that. And I'm very well aware of my privilege, and I understand that I've had it easier than many people. But what I found interesting about a lot of this critical theory is their goal as well is to unify, right? And to bring people together and create more equality. But then you have this intersectionality, and they look at all these little boxes, right? You have to, okay, if you're this skin color, then your privilege is here. If your parents had this much money, your privilege is here. If what your gender is, what your sexual orientation is, and they just keep breaking down people into boxes.
Yeah.
And to me, that's not our way to make the world more equal and unified at all.
Yeah.
And I'm a pretty left-leaning guy, right? I don't know where politics are. It doesn't really matter for me. Like I know Jordan Peterson's a pretty right-leaning guy. There are things I don't agree with him with. There are things I find very interesting.
Yeah.
What he says, right? But the main thing, whether left, right, which is a false dichotomy anyways, is I don't think we should be focusing so much on these little boxes. I mean, they're good to be aware of, but it should not be the center of the conversation.
Yeah, and for me, you have to think critically as a human being. Just these boxes that have been set aside to say, hey, are you left? Are you right? They are designed to produce a certain outcome. And so for me, I approach everything with critical thinking, which is, yes, I can engage with a subject I don't agree with. I still hold my views. Or if I see errors in my way of thinking, adapt that or sort of fix that. So for me, yes, I listen to Jordan Peterson. There are things that, he definitely says that I definitely don't agree with, or I would approach in a slightly different way. But I listen to him in a very critical, with my mind switched on, and not just him, a whole bunch of different people. I enjoy interviews with Joe Rogan because I love long form subjects or long form platforms where you can basically speak on a particular subject for 2-3 hours. That's why some of the things that you brought up previously, there are things that definitely I can go into, but again, some things you just can't explain in 10 minutes. Some things you can't explain in 20 minutes. Sometimes it needs 3 hours. Sometimes it needs 3 weeks, of 1 hour conversations every 2 days, I just think there's enough information out there for us to be able to, think critically and also make our minds up, on what our point of view is on the world, because people like your Elon Musk's and your what you see manifest through everything they do is their point of view. You have to have a point of view on life, and my point of view on African culture is what I'm trying to manifest through Marmalade.
Yeah.
Hence why
Have them very well established.
Hence why when you asked me initially, what is Marmalade? I always start from belief. Which is, what do you believe about the world? For the first year of running Marmalade between 2019 and end of 2020, I didn't even call it a digital media company because you don't know what it is. When you give birth to something off the back of a belief, all you have is just that belief. And you have a mission in terms of what you're trying to achieve, but you don't know what that is. So, I would have conversations with people, and you can almost mentally see them present these boxes and trying to ram it into one of those boxes. And they would ask me, Bob, I've heard what you've said, but is it this? And I'll go, no, we're on a mission to do X, Y, Z. And I just repeated that. And people that are interested would draw closer to that. And people that are just trying to get to, whatever sort of boxes that have prepared for you, you can just see them get frustrated with, just tell me, is it an agency? Is it, is it a platform? So I don't know, because it's a newborn baby with lots of potential, and I don't know what that is. And I'm going to explore that through how it bumps against the real world. And eventually we're going to figure out what this thing is. And we're in a really good place now with that.
I think that's not only an excellent way to think about brands and companies, but also just people in the world in general, right? Like, rather than just thinking about putting everything into categories. And I think that kind of stems from academia, right? If you're an academic, you kind of need to put things in categories to be able to study it, right?
Yeah.
But that's also, again, the beauty with podcasts, right? We don't need to be putting everything on a paper. We can just have these free discussions, and they can go different ways. And the same with a brand or with a company, especially if you have a clear objective and a clear message.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I was always interesting for me with identity. One reason I have Without Borders is because my identity is not tied to geography. I mean, I was born in Chile, moved to Belgium, then went to Canada. Now I'm in Spain. I've never felt like, okay,
Truly global citizen.
yeah, third culture kid, global citizen for sure. And I understand when people say, like, I don't know really where I come from, and I definitely struggle with it still. I get better and better at it, but it's a lifelong struggle, not really having your identity attached to geography. But I think with projects like yours and just where the world is heading right now, people who don't have their identity attached to geography or location are going to start to find a community that is just beyond borders.
Yes.
Yes.
And this is what excites me. When I've got a manifesto. I think I shared that with you, but I'm not sure. But I'll share that with you.
I have it here actually.
And for me, I just woke up one night and just thought, what do I see in the future? And a lot of what you've just said now are things that I don't have any concrete data evidence of some of those things, but it's just what I believe of where the world is going. And you are absolutely spot on. We are going to see, there are people I've come across, and there are people living in Lagos, in Nigeria, in Tanzania, in South Africa, that are by race, they're not from those places, but it resonates so deeply with those cultures, and you can't take that away from them. You can't say because you're a certain skin color, you're not allowed to, if that's what you resonate with, then that's what you resonate with,
Yeah.
I've had conversations, about, culture appropriation, and I hate that word so much. I understand what it means.
Well, that's interesting. So, okay.
I understand what it means, but sometimes I think it's a sliding scale. Yes, there are things that can be appropriated, but there's also appreciation. There's very few conversations about appreciation, and what I'm starting to do with Marmalade is highlights aspects of African culture that's been embraced by people that are non-African or non-Black, because that's that's exciting to me. That's exciting. Things that I've grown up with, to see someone else, embrace that and really want to genuinely know everything they can about it is what really excites me.
Okay, so that's interesting to me, and it kind of ties into something you mentioned earlier when it comes to African Americans, right? Where they might have different views on some of these things.
Yeah.
When it comes to like white dudes with dreadlocks, like appropriation like that, I've only heard, North Americans complain about those types of things and saying like, oh no, if a white dude has dreadlocks, it's racist.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's not racist. It's just, why could
I mean, I'm wearing a Norway hat, and this is probably one of my favorite hats. And, I wore this to an exhibition, not a film screening, in December. And, just off the back of the hat, some people were baffled. Why are you wearing a hat from Norway? Because I love the hat. That's it. It's not, sometimes we don't have to have clear rationales as to why, you want to have dreadlocks. You just want to. And it's not taken away from anyone. Actually, it's just there's something about yourself and your identity and your individuality that you're trying to express. And if it happens to come out in the form of you wearing dreadlocks, good on you,
Do you think like this whole thing, like especially in North America, where you can't say this if you're this skin color, you can't say this if you're from here, you can't wear this if you're from this culture, you can't act like this, you can't sing this if you're from this culture or you're this race?
I've got very strong views on this. Very, very strong views.
Okay, I want to know some of your views. I'm starting to get a hint at it, but I'm also wondering, do you think this is very a North American way about talking about race issues and culture issues, or do you think it exists everywhere? Because from my experience, it seems like these conversations are so prevalent in North America, and in the rest of the world, it's like people don't care as much about like the language you use and stuff like that. If you say the word wrong, they might just be like, hey man, don't say that word around me. Whereas in North America, it's like, you're a racist if you say this, or you're a racist if you have dreadlocks, you're blah blah blah.
Yeah, I think so I'm gonna zoom out, and this is me trying to look at the forest, not the individual trees, because there are lots of trees with different textures and different, and except I'm a AI bot, I can't fully access every single opinion on what people think on this. But zooming out, my observation is the conversation we're truly having about these things literally just boils down to who can speak and who can't, who's allowed to say this and who's not allowed to say this, who's allowed to control certain narratives and who's not allowed. And I fundamentally just oppose that. We are free-thinking human beings that should be able to, explore the world and be allowed to make mistakes. Of course, there are things that we've, and I'm kind of still wrestling with this too. There are things that we have agreed as society, and society means a collective of individuals who have agreed to live by certain principles and adhere to certain but for me, culture is evolving so much at such a pace where what was okay last year, this year might not be cool or might not be acceptable. So ultimately, what do you base your sort of morals and your values on? Again, it just goes back to what type of person are you, and also what's the intention behind what you're looking to do in the world. So for me, part of the way you explore things, especially as a creative, I'm very, very creative, and I also happen to be very artistic too, so I can express my ideas in design or in art. Part of the role of creatives, artists, and just human beings is you explore the world by making mistakes. By you cannot have fully fledged, formulated opinions that isn't going to offend someone somewhere, or it's part of the whole thing. And it's as Jordan says, speak the truth. Just talk truthfully. That's it. Because if you are speaking truthfully, then be ready to contend or wrestle with how that hits the world, because that's coming from a genuine place. So for me, I never really worried too much about trying to express myself, or just people around me. I want to know what's in your head. I want to have conversations, and I don't want to have a conversation with an avatar of the real person. I want to speak to Nolan, actual Nolan, and that's why even this conversation, I'm loving the way it's taking different directions, and of course still coming back to the subject of where we are. But ultimately, I think it's a battle of who's allowed to speak and who's not allowed to speak.
I think you're spot on, and that's what I think about it too. Because, and that's the other thing with Without Borders, right? It's not just about borders with countries, but just with thinking, right? You have to go outside of the borders. And as you said, you might make mistakes. You might say things that are wrong. You might offend people. And from that, you might have to retract. You might have to reformulate your opinions. You might have to expand and grow as a person. But if people are controlling what you're allowed to say, then whoever's doing that is on the wrong side of history. Like, I find it so interesting that if we just look like 40 years ago, 50 years ago, they were burning books because they had gay people in it, right? Or they were burning books because they were celebrating LGBTQ communities, or sometimes even burning books because it wasn't presenting white people in a good way or something like that, right? And then nowadays, it's like the other side all of a sudden saying, okay, we're no longer publishing these books because it has a racist undertone. We're no longer publishing these books because it has this undertone. But it's like, that's kind of denying part of our history, first of all. And also just, it's hiding some of the voices that are out there, and we shouldn't.
It's trying to sanitize humanity, and humanity cannot be sanitized. It's very free flowing. It's very dynamic. It's very, and we don't really. Yes, there's books on psychology, and there's a great understanding of humans, but we're still very weird creatures. We know the right thing to do, but sometimes we choose not to do them. And we can have the logical data on what we should do in certain, but we don't. So again, that's the beauty of humanity, and this sanitization of, because this was, you have to, pull things down, or you have to, hide things. Like, no, it's part of history. History, has its upsides, and also it has its brutal sides as well. And we have to embrace both. It's the yin yang, order, chaos, and, where we have to live is on the borders of, order and chaos, as opposed to just trying to create so-called safe spaces. What the hell does that even mean? So for me, I like to, I like to focus on what I know and what I have very strong understanding and so grasp of.
Definitely.
And that's how I live my life.
I'll respect your safe place. If I come into your safe place, I will follow your rules, but don't enforce your safe place onto me, kind of thing, right? Now, we've talked a lot about a way to solve some of the issues is by focusing on the individual. But then you also mentioned with Marmalade, you're trying to break some of these assumptions people might have about Africa. And
Africans.
And Africans, right? And of course, we can't just focus on the individual in that case, because there are stereotypes, right? So I was kind of wondering what you think about this. Like, I do have some information here about like stereotype threats, right? And stereotype threat is the fear that one might do something that will inadvertently confirm a negative stereotype about one group. And they've done so many studies with this. Like, for instance, with African Americans, when they have to write a certain test, and then they're primed or they're told to think about their race beforehand, they do worse on the test because of just the stereotype that exists out there. But then they've done it with, on the flip side too, when when European Americans were supposed to had a basketball competition and they had to think about their race beforehand, they did worse. And they also did it with Asian people. When the
Please tell me some of those studies. Yeah, they seem very, very interesting. Yeah,
right. So of course, even though we are individuals and we have to think like, okay, what can I do to fix this? The group that we're a part of, or the group that society puts us in, and the stereotypes that are out there do subconsciously influence us without us even knowing it, right? What are some ways you think we can solve this as people, or what are some ways that maybe Marmalade can tackle this as well? Maybe like breaking some of these, because it all comes down to breaking these stereotypes, right? What can Marmalade do to break the stereotypes about African people?
I'll give you one. For example, just visually as well, in terms of what we're doing with Marmalade, from a branding point of view. Who says we need to have African prints over, the landing page on the website, or the logo has to be, an arrow and, bow and just these cliched visual languages or visual communication tools. So we've actually gone the complete opposite, which is actually what we're here to do is present information, and present content in a way that is clean, easy to understand, easy to digest. So even visually, we've completely said, yes, it might have made a whole load of sense to, rather than call it Marmalade, to call it, I don't know, the African platform for global expansion, or whatever, or Africa to the world, or something as. So again, I think stereotypes exist. Some of them are positive, some are negative. And the ones that are negative, we're just trying to tackle those through, not just through our personal point of view or sort of agenda. It's by combing through the internet and finding, people that are talking about these things already, or people that's challenged those conventions or those stereotypes, just by what they've done. And this is basically what we do through some of the content that we've put out. A very good example of that is we do something called Beyond Black. And Beyond Black for me is an exploration into identity, into culture, and into heritage. And it's about where the inspiration came from. I saw something years ago, I think maybe 2019 or 2020, and it was Lewis Hamilton, and it basically said, the first black billionaire, something. And for me, it's like, what's the relevance of yes, I know we want representation. I know, yes, it does, it does help inspire, but he's already a walking billboard in terms of him being black. You're stating the obvious. So,
yeah.
So for me, it's, let's change this stereotypes, not by amplifying the fact that, we're of a certain race, or because it's because by doing that, you're kind of giving into the fact that you believe, Black people, African people can't be billionaires, and actually these people already exist out there. Yeah. So for me, it's about just be yourself and be the best version of yourself, and that just by how you exist will counter some of these things. Like, for example, there isn't anything I would put out there that says, oh, this is why we've called Marmalade, or this is why we look a certain way. It's just implied. You will pick it up. Human beings are a lot smarter than that. So these stereotypes, I don't mind them. Some of them, they're good. They they're humorous. We we can all laugh. Some of them are very hurtful and are designed to produce a certain perception, and those are the ones that we are going after aggressively, but not aggressively in a very overt, oh, Africans are always late, so here are 10 evidence as to why African. So no, just show up to the meeting early, that's it. Or just in your daily interaction. So yeah, that's my very long-winded view on stereotypes.
Yeah.
And by the way, it operates on both sides in the sense of, people that have these stereotypes against, Africans or, Black people. People have stereotypes in general. People have, stereotypes on, on Asian people, on, Arabs, on Dutch people, on English people, on, Welsh people. It's like, people just do, and it's just part of humanity. But as I said, I find some of them funny, and I can laugh, because it's just funny. Yeah,
I agree, man. Like, I want to break down stereotypes and everything, but sometimes humor is humor, right? Sometimes we can have some fun and also recognize some of these stereotypes as well. There's no reason to be in denial about certain things.
Yeah.
Now, Tola, I know you need to go pretty soon here. So is there anything else you want to say to wrap this all up? I mean, I think you've already pointed at a lot of excellent things today, but anything else you want to say to wrap it up?
So I think for me, even though I've spoken in a very very sort of assured way about what we're doing with Marmalade, we don't pretend to know it all. We understand some of the blind spots we might have in terms of, for example, you can't tell the entire story of Africa and Africans without understanding that you might have a certain bias for, let's say, you're from Nigeria or you're West African. So there could be a unconscious focus on some of those things. So we are exploring what we are exploring with open mind, and also with the understanding that culture is evolving, society is evolving, and we are going to evolve, with society as it does. And yeah, we always welcome feedback. Email, comment, DM, any sort of ideas, and we're always looking for collaborators as well, people that are excited about what we're looking to do and what our mission is, to see what could come out of a really remarkable partnership or collaboration. But ultimately, we're here to educate. I hate that word, by the way, but it's I'm using it shorthand now. We're here to educate and entertain the world about African culture in a way that resonates. We also want to create what we call a cultural exchange between Africa and Western culture, just so that it's not strange to say, hey, I'm taking my whole family to Tanzania for a holiday, or you go to an African fine dining restaurant. It's not like, ooh, look, it's just something you do, so ultimately, I just want to live in a world where human beings just connect, irrespective of where you're from, where your background is, and we focus on the more positive aspects of life, and just meet more incredible people like yourself, and just have open conversations. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, everyone who's listening right now, if you want to be a part of that conversation, I'm going to put a link in the description for Marmalade. I'm also looking forward to everything that's going to happen. I need to double check my subscription status, actually, because I haven't gotten an email. Anyway, I'm going to double check that.
Make sure.
Withoutborders.fyi is also a subscription site. So I'm going to put both links in the description, and please subscribe to both of our websites. That's how we can keep this all going. And of course, the bigger the community gets, the better it gets. We can't do this without your support. So please check out our websites, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you very much, Nolan. Thank you, everyone.